r/AskReddit by Planet Reddit. NSFW, what's the worst thing that's happened at your family gathering? Grandma died sitting on the couch and we all thought she was sleeping, so we went on with dinner. We all ate, drank and were merry until the wee hours of the morning, until somebody tried to wake her up. Nobody knew what to think about the fact we partied next to grandma's corpse for like 6 hours. This didn't happen to me, but I watched it happen and it was awful. My cousin was pregnant from a guy who she had only been dating for a few months. But he was a good guy. On Christmas Eve she invited him to our family gathering, and when we were exchanging presents he grabbed a small box from the tree and was 2 seconds from getting down on one knee when that uncle jokingly says, "God, I hope you're not proposing." Everyone laughs and this poor guy is in a half bent knee, half standing pose and just looks up at that uncle and slowly powers through it and slowly gets down on one knee and proceeds to ask her if she'll marry him. She said yes and they're engaged, but it was one of the worst 45 seconds of my life. Cheers to the first heartwarming worst story I've seen so far in this soul-crushing thread. God, what an ass. I'm not one to hold a grudge, but I'd be seriously peeved about that moment for decades. Thanksgiving about 1985. Family gathering at my parents' home. Mom, dad, brother, sister, grandmas, aunts, uncles, cousins, etc. all watching football. Cousin picks up the remote to mess with the volume, but turns on the VCR on accident. Full-blown porno fills the screen. Dad leaps, grabs the remote and fumbles frantically to turn it off. Bible thumper brother and sister-in-law snatch up their kids and leave. Cousin says, "Boy, that sudden death can really get intense. This is like the equivalent of two kids playing with a gun they think isn't loaded. Always clear the chamber, Dad." Oh, he cleared his chamber. Alright. My stepmom never got along with her sister-in-law, brother's wife. They got into a fistfight one Thanksgiving at my grandparents' house. Grandma got mad and called the police. My dad was a police officer at the time. Guess who showed up to arrest his wife and sister-in-law? So how did that play out? Did he actually arrest them or just tell them to smarten up? I was really young, so I don't remember why the fight started. 2 other officers showed up with my dad, and they had to arrest my aunt because she was flipping out and acting crazy. Stepmom just got a summons to appear in court, and was eventually let off because it was obvious that my crazy aunt started it all. We no longer speak to her, lol. Great grandma's funeral in Arkansas. I have some distant third cousin named Stormy. Again, this is Arkansas, and we are all gathered around the grave, and as the preacher starts to lead us in prayer you hear this awful noise. Every turns to look and there is Stormy swinging an armadillo around his head by the tail. One of my other cousins got him to put the armadillo down so we could finish the service, but I don't recall ever having seen him at another family gathering since then. Edit. Yes, Stormy is male. He was about 19 at the time. Yes, the armadillo was alive. Apparently it had a nest or was taking a nap. IDK, what armadillos do in their spare time, under a nearby bush. Sounded kinda like a cat rejecting the advances of an unwanted lover. That sounds as country as it can get. My grandmother tried to shoot herself in the front yard because my mother wouldn't let me and my siblings, 6, 4 and 2, ride sitting on the back hood of my uncle's classic convertible during their neighborhood 4th of July parade. She was angry that no one would be able to see our outfits if we were seated inside the car, and while trying to shoot herself accidentally grazed my grandpa in the process. Good times. Edit. It's called a trunk. THX guys. I'm going to pick my favorite stories from this thread and write a Wes Anderson style dark comedy about a dysfunctional family. This shit is gold. Was this out of the blue or did you suspect she was a bit mental before this? Oh, I have one. This happened like a week ago. At a little get together of family at my house. My brother-in-law and his wife got into a huge argument about their new baby's medical care. The little one had a terrible case of psoriasis, and he blamed his wife for not staying on top of it, causing it to bleed. During this shouting match, Bill declared that if he was going to be raising some other man's baby, he was going to be calling the ducking shots from then on. They have been married for 10 years and have 2 other girls. We were all so mortified. We left my house. 10 other people got into cars and went to the park. Quick edit. This was my husband's brother and his wife. Shit has to get pretty awkward before you leave your own house to make things better. It was brutal. Several of us had suspected she'd stepped out. But this was a bomb. My youngest brother got into my car with his salad bowl still in his hand. Proposed to my girlfriend at my birthday party and she said no, then told me she had been cheating on me. This was post cake. Bullet dodged. Think of it this way. At that exact point in time, that was probably one of the best outcomes. Oh yay. I couldn't be happier now. She ended up getting back with her ex, guy she cheated on me with, who had cheated on her I think it was 4 times. Fast forward. Now it's 5. Beach. During Christmas with the family we discovered the hard way that my little sister, who was 3 years old, was prone to febrile seizures. Everyone was freaking out while my little sister was blue and foaming at the mouth. Edit. Febrile seizure. Not epileptic. Edit 2. This was 10 years ago. She stopped having them after a year or 2. She's now perfectly normal. My coolest grandparent had a seizure. I was in late high school at the time and had to take all the little kids upstairs and distract them while everyone else waited for the ambulance, etc. I remember trying to teach them to count to 10 in Japanese because I just learned in school and it was the only thing I could think to pass the time. Good on you for helping in a stressful situation. Aunts, uncles and dads start arguing over my grandfather's possessions after his passing in his house after his funeral. Lots of yelling. Pushing. Get the duck outs that day. Eventually pulled my dad out of the house in an effort to save the family. They never recovered. My uncle passed away without ever speaking with my dad again. And the others speak a bit to each other but we haven't had any family events. It's been 3 years. Christmas at my auntie's house with my whole extended family on my dad's side. And their pets. In particular these 2 dogs. One of which was very fond of the other. And this dog decided he wanted to have his way with the smaller, uninterested dog. Long story short, the large dog came all over the kitchen floor, leaving a huge mess that we had to clean up before eating our dinner. Okay, so not family related, but my friend worked at a vet's in high school. There was this pug that would get bored and lick his own dog until he came in his own face. It did this many times. My friend's pug cokied its leg and started pissing while standing on top of a small hill. Lost its footing. And proceeded to roll to the bottom of the hill. Pissing all over itself the whole way down. 10/10 pugs are entertaining. Thanksgiving back in 1998. I was 8 years old and my wealthy grandparents decided to take the whole family to Maui for the week. This included our 5-person family and around 15 extended family members. All was great until Thanksgiving dinner. My older cousins started bickering which turned into a pretty big altercation and some food throwing. 8-year-old Meowd is loving it until the uncles get involved. My 18-year-old male cousin who was a total asswipe starts freaking out at my 15-year-old female cousin, calling her a horse for reasons unbeknownst to me. At this point, female cousin's dad comes flying over and punches his nephew so hard that literally is thrown a few feet and nearly knocked out. Now the other uncle has to defend his son which results in a few punches between those two until my family can separate them. There will never be a better Thanksgiving dinner. And my grandparents will never take us anywhere again. We gathered at my grandma's house, where my mom and all her sisters had been raised. My oldest aunt had done a bunch of dodgy stuff to glom all the estate and the sisters had come in force with their husbands and kids to try to talk sense into her. It did not work. They should have lawyered up but this was the 60s. Hell. I don't know why they were all so weak. All of us cousins had been kicked outside while the grown-ups argued. I was just a little kid and I went in to get a glass of water. She had put locks on the cupboard. Mean aunt came in and slapped me across the face so hard I was staggered. I did not get water. One of my older cousins found me crying and took me to town, riding on his shoulders part of the way to buy me a soda at the drugstore and a few toys. Many years later my mom told me mean aunt most likely poisoned grandma. And it seems true. That's ducked up. I hope that the mean aunt is never invited to any family gatherings. Mean aunt has been dead for many years. It took a number of years, I guess, for my mom to get hit with the idea of what happened to her mother. She said it was something so awful she did not want to think it. One day she told my dad that she had an awful thought. And my dad answered, "I know what you are going to say. And I have already thought it. My grandma died in 1965. When I was 5 years old. We came in from play. And my mom was ironing clothes and crying. When I was in my late teens, my mom finally told me she thought her mom had been poisoned. And after a bit of looking into what her symptoms were, I think she lived with mean aunt who never married and was a real weirdo. Aunt taught first grade. And spent part of the year in the town where the family home was. The school year in a small city a few hours away. Grandma always came along and lived in an apartment with her. On the face of it seemed okay, the widow mother living with her unmarried daughter. This was back in the day when medicine capsules could be taken apart, and I think that is how she did the deed. Over a period of time, Grandma had many of the symptoms of arsenic poisoning. And also thallium. God, this feels so odd to write this. It sounds crazy. She had nail changes, some hair loss, stomach pain, vomiting. She also was totally pissed that my dad did not marry her and threw a hissy fit on my folks' wedding night. I could go on telling stories, but suffice it to say she was not a nice woman. I remember he quite well. My theory is that she was caught out by the town doctor and her lawyer and they blackmailed her. Both of them got stacks of cash and property from mean aunt. Years later the lawyer was disbarred for criminally mishandling an estate. Sheesh. Well, one of my aunts found out her husband was cheating on her with a 22-year-old Chinese econ student. He was 63 at the time, so there's that. What was the aftermath? What went down? I'm guessing the 22-year-old Chinese econ student went down. My mother-in-law's boyfriend randomly, out of nowhere, just says, "In case anyone was wondering, I'm against gay marriage." My mother-in-law, to her credit, looks at him and just said, "Did anyone ask?" It was an awkward couple of minutes. Dude wanted a fight. He usually does. He's kind of a jackass. My alcoholic uncle got so drunk at his own daughter's wedding that he pissed on the wedding cake in front of half the wedding party. He quit drinking after that. Leahy, you drunk old duck. Time for some shit cake. Bobandy. Relatives showing off their weird looking baby and people trying to not say anything awful about it. Being one of the first to greet them. And thus having no warning. All I could come up with was, "Oh, that's a baby." I guess no blood was spilled, but I felt like dirt afterwards. This is any event with a new baby. I second that. Very few babies are good looking. They need a few weeks to ripen. I luckily missed this Christmas cause me and my mom and dad were in Disney. My great grandma had a dog. Can't recall what it was, but it was super small. Since before I was born. Well, one Christmas everyone is eating in the kitchen with a clear view of the dog in the back ears. In the middle of Christmas dinner, a big Doberman came into the backyard and ripped the little dog's throat out. Kind of ruined Christmas. Whoa, that sucks. 5 years or so ago, I went to my aunt and uncle's Christmas party. My one cousin spilled some alcoholic eggnog. And the family dog drank a lot of it before they realized to clean it up. And the eggnog was powerful. Anyway. The dog starts going through every stage of alcohol poisoning and we just had to watch and hope for the best because no vets were on call around us due to Christmas. Anyway, me and a few cousins were in the garage and the dog is laying down with labored breathing. And we're comforting our one cousin who was younger and who was crying. And we've got her more calmed down. Just petting the dog. My grandma walks in. And she has never been, too sensitive? I guess? She takes one look at the dog and says, "Ha, the dog's gonna die," and walks out. And my cousin starts wailing again. And all us elder cousins were angry at her. Anyway, the dog lived and is still alive today. It was just shitty that it all happened, and I cannot imagine what it would be like to witness a family dog being ripped apart in front of everyone. I really feel bad for your family. And glad you didn't have to be there. The whole affair is ruined and somber. As it would be, because that is traumatizing and a horrible Christmas present to have your dog die. Now I feel sad. My grandmother threw her prosthetic breast at me. I was watching the American football game during Thanksgiving while my relatives, mostly female, were sitting at the table within view of the living room. Suddenly, I hear, "Hey, name." And as I turn to look in that direction, this blob comes at me and I reactively catch it. They start laughing and I realize that I'm holding my grandma's tit. Never has a breast been rejected by my hand so quickly. We had a huge family dinner at a very fancy restaurant. My great aunt decided to move a very fancy pot of flowers with some peacock feathers stuck in it out of the way. In this case, out of the way meant right above the candles. It turns out peacock feathers burn incredibly fast and produce a lot of smoke. The whole restaurant had to be evacuated. To be honest, it wasn't really that bad. The dinner had been incredibly boring. 14-year me certainly thought the fire made things more interesting. 14-year you was right. Lol. 50yo. Me thinks the same thing. My extended family ostracized my parents. There was a big grift in the family between one of my uncles and my mom. He is very manipulative and all around a huge a-hole. They decided to sit down and gave my dad an ultimatum. Either it is them or my mom. My dad grabbed my mom by the hand and left. Never looked back. A dead rat inside the water tank. This one day we woke up in a relative's house after a gathering night. We found the morning water taste weird. So my cousin and host checked the water tank. The rat was floating there. Everyone in his house headed to the hospital instantly. Edit. A lot of people is asking me what a water tank is and why people would have one. Here where I live, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Sometimes we suffer with lack of water distribution, especially in summer. So we gotta store the water we have in the tanks. It's very common here. That's it. No biggie. We once had a dead monkey inside our water tank. We noticed something was wrong with the water but nobody bothered to look inside the tank. Me and my father took a peek inside the tank after like 3 days. The smell was horrible. The monkey was bloated to the size of a gorilla. I have the smallest hands so I had to remove the monkey by my bare hands. The monkey disintegrated upon my touch. I was left with a handful of fur and skin. Scooped up the leftover fur, skin, flesh and whatnot by hand. Proceeded to use the same water for drinking, bathing without issue. It was too expensive to empty the tank and clean it. So we took a chance. This is a very common occurrence where I live. The heat forces monkeys to climb into water tanks to drink water. What in the duck? Well, we have a family reunion annually in Virginia for some distant relatives on my mom's side. No one in my immediate family has attended until about 7 years ago when my mother started driving my grandma to the reunion. Dad says that we could make it a family trip. But mom brushed the idea off. My parents divorced 5 years ago. And the next year mom somehow cons me into attending the reunion with her and her new boyfriend. Everyone at the reunion already knew her boyfriend. Turns out she had been taking him up to our family reunion for the last few years with my grandma. I'm starting to believe my grandma never cared for my dad all that much. My grandma was staying over with us at my parents' house on Christmas Eve. The evening went great. And everyone was happy. Right as everyone's going to bed, my grandma starts throwing up in her bed, saying she feels horrible. But she doesn't want us to call an ambulance because she doesn't want to trouble anyone on Christmas Eve. She's like the epitome of a sweet old lady. My parents called an ambulance anyways. And good thing. Because it turns out she was having a heart attack. She lived. Ended up having a quadruple bypass. Followed by a full recovery. Our Christmas miracle. She's still alive and kicking. And still smart as a whip. A cougar showed up and we had to lock ourselves inside the house with a shotgun until the cops arrived. Edit. This is getting way more upvotes than is acceptable. Edit to edit harder. Gold. Row. You people have worse taste than I thought. I thought you were talking about your aunt. Edit. I get it. He was though he. Simir. Let me show you what good puss feels like. Mum, get the shotgun. My 60-year-old aunt showed me her new boobies and told me she'd take my V card and show me what good kitten feels like. She did this at the dinner table. Man, I have to know more. Is she just ducking nuts? Was she drunk? Just a massive slut? Or are you like a perfect 10/10 with a sexual reputation that even your family members are drawn to? If it was so casual. Clearly she does stuff like this a lot. What happened afterwards? Did everyone freak out? Did they just ignore it? Haha, no, I'm no prize. She was a druggy alcoholic that was property of a biker gang at the time, if that gives you a better idea. Introduced to a distant cousin for the first time who was a 10. She was beautiful, and I was told that she was deaf. I had never met a deaf person. We were both 15 years old. I shook her hand and said to my brother who was standing next to me, "She is a babe." She started to laugh. "I read lips," she said. Edit. Clarification. Holy shit. When I first read that comment I thought you meant she was 10 years old. Relax. He said distant cousin. So it's not incest. Was celebrating an uncle's birthday and we realized about 15 minutes into it that grandma died. Everyone lost their mind. Because she was 75 and seemed fine 10 minutes before. Died of a massive brain aneurysm. Whole family was devastated. I still took some cake. I'll piggyback off of yours because it's so similar down to being at an uncle's birthday party. My 53-year-old mother stood up, said I don't feel well and dropped dead from an aneurysm in front of all her friends and family. I wasn't there when it happened, but the funeral was particularly grim because almost everybody there had just witnessed her death. She was the baby sister to the uncle whose birthday it was and they were best friends. It traumatized him and he no longer celebrates his birthday. Jesus. I'm so sorry. This happened just a couple months ago. My wife is pregnant and we were a few months in. We had gone to the doctor to find out the sex and were throwing a family party to deliver the news. Her family is very well off and very large. I'm talking 50 people within a 5-block radius to her grandparents' house. My side of the family is super small. Just my mom, stepfather, and aunt come to the party. So I supplemented my side with some of our mutual couple friends. About an hour into the party we had everyone go outside for the reveal. We prepare these poppers filled with confetti, either blue for male or pink for female, for the announcement. I thought it would be hilarious to make one filled with the opposite color, but my wife said no. Anyways, everyone gets a popper. Lines up on either side of the driveway. 3, 2, 1 pop. Pink glitter and confetti fly in the air. Everyone is hooting and hollering in celebration. We start receiving congratulatory remarks from my friends and her family. I made the announcement that we had come up with a name. Right after I said the name, my mother comes up to me and says, "Are you sure it's not a boy?" "Yes. I'm very sure. The doctor confirmed it last weekend." A tear starts to roll down her cheek. "And you are firm on the name? What about my middle name? Jean." "I'll get with my wife, but I think we are pretty set on the name we picked out." She left shortly after that exchange without saying goodbye. Apparently right after the pop, she turned to my friend who had just gotten her PhD and asked how reliable those sonograms are at determining sex of the child. She gave us the cold shoulder for the next 3 months and has a collection of boy names ready just in case 3 doctors and a handful of nurses are wrong about us having a baby girl in December. TLD, our mother is sour about the sex of my unborn child. Why? Good question. I think it has to do with her past history. She had an older brother who didn't treat her very well, verbally abusive and generally a douchebag. Her mother favored him over her and let him get away with everything. It's just my guess, but I think her disdain for a granddaughter comes from her past relationship with her brother. It could also be that I was an only child and she has no clue what to do with another female. She likes my wife, but I get the feeling that she doesn't really try to get to know her. It's bothered me, but living across state lines has put a strain on everyone. I'm currently working on finding a job that will take us back to South Texas where everyone lives. Or it could be that she's sad that the family name won't be passed on. I confronted her about the weekend a few days after and she couldn't give me a straight answer as to why she acted the way she did. I figure her emotions were running high and that everything will work itself out in the end. It was the first time that she had interacted with her family since the wedding. If she wants to continue to be a child after my child is born, then I will push the topic further and force her to deal with her issues or not see my child. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for 3 videos a day.